Breaking news, thousands of Polish troops are going into battle. It has happened. Warsaw is deploying its troops. An urgent decree is already on the table. NATO has made its move. A military response to Putin. In Moscow, they're already holding their heads in their hands. Putin will remember this act of revenge for a long time. Let's go through everything step by step. Greetings to everyone, this is Ukraine Today. Renata Aslanova with the latest events. It has happened. Poland is deploying about 40,000 troops on the borders with Belarus and Russia. This decision was made against the backdrop of rising tensions after Russian drones entered the country's airspace on September 10th. In addition, it is expected that tens of thousands of troops will take part in the joint Russian-Belarusian exercises called Zapad 2025, which also prompted Poland to decide to deploy its soldiers near the eastern border.
Poland has been preparing for the Zapad 2025 maneuvers for many months. The Polish army conducted exercises involving more than 30,000 Polish soldiers as well as alliance troops in order to respond adequately. Let us remember that Zapad 2025 is a strategic exercise.
The country's Deputy Minister of Defense also echoed the concerns of political leaders that the exercise could become a precondition for Russian aggression against the country and the EU. And Poland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski, stated that during the exercise, Russia and Belarus will be practicing very aggressive scenarios. He compared them to similar exercises that were conducted on the eve of Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 and at the start of the war against Ukraine. And the country's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, even went so far as to threaten Russia, stating that any attempts to attack Poland in the future will receive an appropriate response.
Anyone who tries to attack Poland in any way will be appropriately punished, just as it happened on the night of September 10th.
The Prime Minister emphasized that the Polish authorities are absolutely certain that Russia is behind this provocation. At the same time, Warsaw rejects all manipulations claiming that Ukraine is allegedly behind the attack on Poland. Tusk also added that Poland is establishing cooperation with Ukraine in developing systems to shoot down enemy drones. He called Ukrainian systems the best for creating a highly effective anti-drone shield, since they have been tested on the battlefield. Against this backdrop, from September 10th for 9 days, Poland restricted air traffic in the eastern part of the country, along the borders with Belarus and Ukraine. The restrictions were introduced for reasons of national security in accordance with the decree limiting flights for a period of no more than 3 months. And it's not just Poland resorting to such drastic measures. NATO has announced that it is preparing defensive military measures in response to the incursion of drones into Poland in order to strengthen deterrence against Russia on the alliance's eastern flank. The military response will be coordinated by the Supreme Commander of the NATO allied forces in Europe. His command is currently assessing the situation. As noted, any response will be aimed at strengthening deterrence capabilities. In the long term, much still needs to be done.
Looking ahead, there is a lot of work to be done. Currently, alliance countries are improving their armaments to reduce costs and enhance combat operations.
Meanwhile, allies are offering assistance. Germany promises to expand airspace patrols over Poland, to strengthen support for Ukraine and work on the 19th package of sanctions against Russia. This was reported by a government representative. The response to Russia's actions includes extending the deployment of the Bundeswehr's air defense squadron in Poland for another 3 months, effectively until the end of the year. It seems that all this news has caused a slight panic in Russia. Russia has responded to Poland's decision to close border checkpoints on the border with Belarus. The spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, stated that such a move will have consequences. She noted that the decision of the Polish authorities, as it turns out, undermines fundamental humanitarian principles, primarily the freedom of movement for people. And of course, Moscow started talking about yet another gesture of goodwill.
Warsaw demonstratively ignored the decisions made as a gesture of goodwill to move the maneuvers away from the Polish borders to the central part of Belarus and to reduce the number of personnel and military equipment involved. It is obvious that the confrontational steps taken by the Polish leadership are all aimed at a single goal: to justify the course toward further escalation of tensions in the center of Europe.
She added that Poland's decision to close its borders would cause serious harm to its partners who use the border with Belarus for trade. Shock? Could it be that the Suwalki corridor is truly under threat, stirred up by Putin's plans? The world is holding its breath, waiting for a strike. Watch now for all the details of this sensational forecast.
The Suwalki corridor is NATO's most vulnerable spot. And in the near future, Putin may try to launch an incursion into this Achilles heel. This is reported by the British publication The Sun.
We are observing an increased Russian military presence in Kaliningrad and Belarus. We are seeing sudden military exercises and unusual troop movements. We are currently facing a complex hybrid war characterized by significant GPS jamming, deliberate sabotage of critical submarines, and the presence of enigmatic little green men actively stirring up considerable unrest among Russian-speaking minorities.
This concerns the so-called Suwalki corridor, about 100 kilometers long, which connects Poland and the Baltic states. Military analysts often describe it as NATO's most vulnerable zone. If Russia and Belarus seize this corridor, they would cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from their European NATO allies.
Anything that resembles a large-scale military buildup on the border with Ukraine just before the 2022 war should be interpreted as a serious warning sign. The movement of fuel, vehicles, and other military assets could be an indication of a future invasion.
The military exercises Zapad 2025, which will be jointly conducted by Russia and Belarus, are already scheduled from September 12th to 16th. And they will partly take place near the borders with Poland and Lithuania.
We must take exercises near the borders of NATO and the EU seriously. Both neighboring countries and NATO itself are treating them with the utmost seriousness. Lithuania and our allies are ready, united, and closely monitoring the developments and are prepared to respond if necessary.
Military experts are urging close monitoring of these exercises. And the NATO countries bordering Russia are conducting their own military exercises during this same period. 10 Northern European NATO countries are participating in the Teresis 25 exercises. But Latvia is holding its own national defense exercises, Thunderstrike. Poland is conducting its own Iron Defender 25 exercises, which have brought together 30,000 service members.
We need to set challenging tasks for our military and force them to think outside the box. It's not just about reaching the location, training, and setting up camp. We need tests. Russia knows that if we are fully armed and ready for battle, they will definitely lose. So we won't be given the easiest conditions. We will have to act under pressure.
Suwalki Corridor. It is the only land route for NATO forces to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It is considered the Achilles heel of the alliance due to its limited military potential compared to other NATO members. The Kaliningrad region and the Suwalki corridor are considered potentially dangerous zones, because it is through them that Russia might try to block the Baltic countries, on one side from the sea and on the other by land. Perhaps the Zapad 2025 exercises. Moscow uses them to test NATO's response to provocations. Moscow is ramping up the mobilization of the Russian population and economy. This confirms that Ukraine's aggressor is preparing for a possible war with NATO and the Suwalki corridor, the most likely place for the confrontation to begin.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The Kremlin is testing the defenses of Poland and all of NATO, using drones as an element of hybrid warfare. And in Warsaw, they openly say this is no accident but part of systematic actions by the Russian army. More details about the attack by the aggressor country on Poland coming up in the report.
Oh God.
This is the beginning of World War III. NATO countries have never seen an attack like this before, or is it just a provocation? Reactions to the attack by Russian drones on Polish territory on September 10th differ drastically, but the fact remains. For the first time, the Russian Federation has openly attacked a country of the North Atlantic Alliance with strike drones. According to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, a total of 19 Shahed-type drones entered their territory. Preliminarily, only 4 of them were successfully shot down. The others were likely suppressed by electronic warfare systems. At the same time, it is known that one of the drones managed to fly about 300 kilometers across Poland. However, the official report states that all targets were destroyed. And this was with the efforts of aviation from almost the entire eastern flank of NATO, as well as advanced radar reconnaissance.
The Polish side claims that they shot down all of them. At the same time, NATO tanker aircraft were launched from Italy. This was done to refuel the fighter jets located in Polish airspace, which played a key role in repelling the drone attack.
However, the flight did not go unnoticed for civilians either. The remains of a downed drone destroyed a residential building. There was also a recorded incident of a UAV crashing right in the middle of the streets. In addition, thousands of people were unable to depart from Polish airports.
The operations of 4 airports were suspended, that is, the main hub in Warsaw, this is Chopin Airport, and Warsaw-Modlin also ended up affected. Rzeszów-Dziesiątka, the airport closest to Ukraine, and Lublin.
But even more shocking than the very fact of the attack on NATO is the reaction that followed from the alliance members and from Poland itself. Yes, in Ukraine, which essentially became the target of an attack by 24 strike drones, this raid was called a provocation, even referencing the very nature of the casualties.
Most likely, we are dealing with a large-scale provocation, but at the same time, we are consulting with our allies. I am in constant contact with the NATO Secretary General. This is the first time that Russian drones have been shot down on NATO territory in Ukraine, and that is why all our allies are taking this situation very seriously. We have not recorded any casualties, but of course, the search for the downed drones continues.
Deep concern was also expressed by NATO leadership. The Secretary General of the Alliance, Mark Rutte, stated that the alliance will defend every inch of its territory, but a full assessment of the incident is still ongoing. In the United States, where consultations began immediately after the drones crossed the border, they have so far decided to remain completely silent in public.
Mr. President, what about the Russian drones that entered Polish territory?
Belarus, on the other hand, did not remain silent despite the fact that most of the drones that reached Poland came from there. Their defense minister, without hesitation, stated, "If it weren't for us, Warsaw wouldn't have had time to react at all. So you should even thank us for warning you."
Through the established communication channel from 11 p.m. on September 9th to 4 a.m. on September 10th, our on-duty forces and resources were exchanging information. Information about the air and radar situation was shared with the on-duty forces and resources of Poland and the Republic of Lithuania. In doing so, we notified them about the approach of unidentified flying objects toward their country's territories. This allowed the Polish side to respond promptly to the actions of the drones by scrambling their on-duty forces.
However, the main question remains unanswered. What was it anyway? According to analysts, with such an attack, Russia is trying to achieve several objectives at once. First of all, to show Europeans what war is really like and that it is much closer than they think. Secondly, to test how NATO would respond to a possible incursion, particularly in the Suwalki corridor area.
And in this particular case, it's a comprehensive measurement of all possible reactions and a thorough assessment from the crucial perspective of military potential and capabilities. What and how works against them. All the more so since Belarus is starting the Zapad 2025 exercises, and even more so because Russian troops and the Russian Federation, among other things, have, if you can put it that way, access to this Belarusian theater of operations.
Also, a drone attack on Poland is meant to push Europe to be less determined in defending Ukraine's interests in future negotiations, since it is the Europeans today who are resisting the idea of the US and Russia imposing on official Kiev the notion of unconditional concessions. Moreover, analysts believe that if the plan does not work, it may well be repeated.
It is no coincidence that on the territory of the Karelian Peninsula, Russia is now building up military infrastructure that will directly threaten Finland, which is currently a member of NATO and an adversary of Russia. It is also no coincidence that today, on the territory of the Republic of Belarus, a scientific complex is operating. Undoubtedly, all these preparations, all these military maneuvers, are primarily aimed at achieving certain objectives which in the future may be directed either against the Baltic states or once again against Poland. Undoubtedly, a new round of escalation is bound to happen.
It seems that NATO also understands the growing risks, so despite rather sluggish rhetoric, they have nevertheless decided to urgently mobilize Polish reservists and strengthen the air defense in the eastern part of the country.
The European Union has already announced that it will allocate additional funds for Poland to purchase air defense systems, specifically those designed to counter such threats, including artillery systems, electronic warfare equipment, and so on.
For its part, Ukraine has once again stated that if the aggressor is not stopped, the escalation will only intensify. Therefore, pressure on Moscow needs to be increased. President Zelensky also promised that, if necessary, Ukraine would help Poland by organizing a population alert system and sharing effective methods for countering Russian drones and missiles.
And what do you think about the latest developments? Share your thoughts in the comments, give the video a like and stay updated on the main news. More to come.